Hello, this is Dan Dawson with WriteFiction.online. WriteFiction.online is a web application to help authors stay organized and create commercial fiction. So I'm going to perform a quick tutorial to kind of show you what the site is about and how to use it, and show you some of the finer details. Being an author is hard, and it's hard because a blank screen is not very helpful. So what I've done is I've read a bunch of books on how to write fiction, and I took the best practices and I kind of brought them together into a single web application to help me write books. Well, now that the actual product works, I'm sharing it with other people so that they can become better authors. The application is completely free, and it'll help you create, analyze, and prepare your story for submission. Hopefully this makes your life just a little bit easier. What does it feature? You can have unlimited stories, unlimited characters, unlimited story notes, storylines, all of that. But there's some fun things in here which I'm really quite proud of. The storylines are neat because you create scenes in a storyline and then you use the timeline to weave those scenes together. It allows you to make really complicated fiction easy, and it also allows you to manage the arrangement of your scenes better than any word processor could ever do. Name and profession generator. There's a lot of name generators out there, but this one's actually built into the tool, and it's using Census Bureau data and labor statistics to pull up professions and names, and it gives you a list of 10 male and 10 female and 10 jobs, and you can literally just hit refresh button as many times as you want and pick out the pieces of data you want. So if you're stuck on something, you need a name, you just go there, you just get it. It's not a big deal. Anything you enter into the system can be exported. It's your data. No one else has access to it. No one else can get into it. The only person who can get into this is you with your email and password, and you're the only one who can pull anything out of it. And the thing is completely locked down on a DigitalOcean server in New York with an armed guard, moat, alligators, the whole 9 yards. It's pretty epic. Scene analysis. So when you put in your scene data, the tool will actually strip it down into individual sentences, analyze it, and figure out how much percentage is dialogue and how much is not dialogue, and it'll get you your word count to make sure your scenes are the appropriate length. It does some really neat things like that. It'll even identify poor word choices based on the elements of style. Story analysis. If you're writing science fiction, you need to have a certain word count. The expectation is around 150,000 words. If you're writing a Western, the word count's around 80,000. So instead of you having to figure all that out, you literally just go in, pick the drop down of what type of fiction you want to write, and it calculates all that for you and gives you charts and graphs to figure out where you're at in the completion of your book. Now, everything you plug in, all this metadata about the story, is really a giant outlining tool to help you plan what you're going to do. All that planning information can be exported out so you can go through like a checklist to make sure that everything you defined about your character and your character notes ends up in your manuscript. What you don't want to have happen is to have your idea of the story you're telling be different than that of the reader. And so this gives you the ability to cross-check yourself to make sure that everything you plugged in ended up in the final copy. Now, anytime I learned something new that I was like, wow, that's really cool, I captured it as a reference and I put it in the code so you could literally just click on a button and be like, hey, I want to know more about this. And it'll just take you to another tab with someone else's site that I'm not affiliated with that basically gives you an expert's opinion on what it means to write a scene, what does it mean to write a pitch, all these different things. If I thought it was cool and interesting, I plugged it in here. So I've curated a lot of great writing material and referenced it from inside the web app. So you don't have to go do that searching and hunting. It's just in here. You just find it and click on it. Why would you choose to use WriteFiction.online? Well, it has a lot of benefits. First, it's online, which means you can access it anywhere, which means if you had a great idea at work over your lunch break, you could log in and you could add those character notes. You want to look up the pitch on your phone to tell someone, at a restaurant, you can look it up. You want a Chromebook on the couch while you're watching TV? Awesome. It can do that for you. If you noticed up at the top, this is HTTPS all the time. You go here, it's automatically encrypted. It's encrypted all the time. Everything that comes in, everything that comes out, you're completely secure. So let's talk about where this thing lives. It lives on a DigitalOcean server in the New York 3 data center. It's PCI certified. It's a LIMP server, which means it's Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and Python. It's completely locked down. It is a vault. There's no way in, no way out except for through secure HTTPS. The thing is a brick wall for hackers. So your data is safe and it's precious. We know that. We've worked very hard to make sure that no one can get to it but you. No spam. I don't know about you, but I hate spam. So we're not going to spam you. It's in our privacy policy that we don't spam people. The only thing we use your email for is to identify your account and perform password resets. That's it. There is an opt-in box that allows you to opt into receiving a survey for being able to weigh in on what features you would like to see added to the tool. I highly would encourage you to leave that box checked when you register your account so that you can get a survey from me saying, hey, what do you want to see next? If you want to have that kind of insight into the tool, please leave that checked. WriteFiction.online is free. It contains no ads. We just want to offer the best writing experience for the web. It's free, responsive, it's secure. You have absolutely no reason not to use this. When you click on register, you'll see a registration form. You have your name, your address, your password, confirmation, the big note about how we hate spam, and this checkbox here. If you don't want to ever get any kind of emails from us, uncheck that guy. It's that easy. Now, I already have an account, so I'm just going to go ahead and sign in. It says, hey, welcome, Dan. And so now I'm in, and it takes me to the main page, except for now instead of saying register, it says user stories, or your stories. And then up above, you have the stories link that you can click on, and it'll take you to your stories. Now, I cleared out everything so that I could walk through this process with you, from a blank canvas, so you know, hey, this is really super easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click new, and I get a form that says, hey, I want to know the title of your book. If you don't know a title, you can just put anything you want just to kind of hold it. So I'm going to create a quick story. I'm going to call it Lost Phone. And if you want to know more about how to title a book, you can go through and you can click on this Learning Center. And because it has this little dialogue next to it, this little icon, this says, hey, it's going to pop it up in a new tab. So you're not going to lose your place. You can click on this, read it, and not lose your place. It's completely fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some paragraphs I've already made and just kind of throw them in here. So my whole story about a lost phone is a young man finds a dead man in an alley with a high-tech phone clutched in his hands. The phone is unlocked and a secure message arrives with instructions for a delivery job with a high cash output. So I don't even know where I'm going with this yet. The whole point of this is like, hey, I have an idea. I want to do something. I want to do something where a young person gets wrapped up in an espionage, super high-tech world of criminal enterprises. So with that, I'm just going to kind of just roll with it, right? So I'm going to go through and create, some basic stuff. I'm going to pick my story type. The story type here is what determines the length of the book. So if I say I want a young adult book, so I'm going to keep this, somewhat, PG-13-ish. If I select that, it's going to change the length of the book. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, yeah, this is action adventure. Now, you may be thinking, how come this isn't a drop-down with all the different genres? The problem is there's thousands of genres. And so not knowing which ones you're going to use and not making that list a billion lines long, make it comma separated so you can be as specific as you need to be, and that way I'm not excluding anyone's niche market. Now, typically, when you're submitting to a literary agent, they want to know more about the market. They want to know who's your competition, how much money is made in this space. And so they'll ask you questions, and they'll want search tags so they can go look up books, that match, your audience and your market so they can understand whether or not your book is viable. Now, typically, you start with the summary and the pitch. They can be almost the same thing. It kind of depends on how crazy you get with the summary and how wild you get with the pitch. typically a pitch is supposed to be a 60-second verbal explanation to get someone to know what your book is about. So when someone asks you, hey, what's your book about? If you go into this 10-minute long thing of explaining the finale and no one actually understands what's going on, you need to boil it down. You need to be like, hey, this is what's going on. So right here, this pitch isn't great because it doesn't include enough of the story. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy, and I'm going to come back and fill it in. The marketing copy is primarily for, like I said, the literary agent, for you to explain who's your market, who's your audience, how many sales are in that space. Go ahead and record this. It'll show up in your manuscript, one of your pages inside there. Back cover copy, you've all seen it on the back of a book. This is kind of the teaser to get people to do this. This is very important. I typically save it as one of my final things. And then about the author. So about the author, there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a guide here. You can click on that. They'll give you all the information you need on how to write a really good about the author. I just made up a really super generic one just for the sake of this tutorial. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. You'll see the big purple bar that says it's saved. When you want to go back, you can go back and you're out. And so now I see Lost Phone, novel young adult, 55 to 80,000 words. And I can go through and I can see additional information about this. If I create a new book, I can use these arrows to move them around, so I can put the one I care about most on top. If I click remove, it'll prompt me so you can't do it by accident, which is kind of cool. And then if you open the book, you can go in and really start getting crazy with it. Progress allows you to see where you're at. So the green bar says, hey, this is 80,000, this is 55,000. I want my word count to be in between these two bars so it fits within the guidelines of literary fiction. Or not literary fiction, but fiction for my audience. So here we have estimated a number of scenes that I'm going to need and the estimated number of sequels. So that's in here already, and so it'll keep track as I add things to the timeline so it knows where I sit, and I'll know how far I am. And then there's actually a graph that shows up here once I add words to the timeline. Once you go through and you're done, you'll come to this page a lot and you'll print the manuscript, you'll print the summary, the story notes. You'll do all these things as part of the revision process. You'll go through and you'll export this content to open document text, which will open in everything. It'll open in any of your Word products. It'll open in Google. It'll open in LibreOffice. Whatever you want, it'll basically just open. It's a standardized format. So once that guy opens up, you can go through and you can see what you're working with, and this will allow you to do other things. Now, let me see here. All right, so I'm going to go back, and I'm going to hit open. So now that I've hit open, you'll see this long list of instructions, and you'll see your summary will follow along. So when you're working with different books, you can always just go back and find the right one, enter it, and it's not a big deal. So each one of these tabs ends up having a little block of instructions that tells you what to do and how to do it. And so you can read through this. You can reference the plot and structure book. You can go pick that up on Amazon. It'll help you with some of the conventions inside this. You can click on characters and be like, okay, I'm going to add a character. So you click on the character, you have all this, and you're like, hey, I don't really have a name. So I click on the name generator, and the name generator will bring me, it'll open up basically a new tab if you click it from that page. And it'll give you a list of everything. And you can be like, okay, I want to use Stuart Hicks. I can just copy him, and I can go over here and I can paste him, and I can type in whatever I want, and I can go ahead and save him, and he'll save. When I go back, he's here. Now if I put a summary in there, that data would show up underneath so that I'll know more about this character, and I can go into notes and it'll show me his name, and I can go through and I can add any number of descriptions, desires, goals, abilities, flaws, limitations. So I'm going to go through and say colorblind. So I can go through and I can type in anything I want, And the great thing about using Chrome as a browser is if you type something wrong, it'll highlight it for you. So you kind of have a built-in spell check if you use the appropriate browser. So I go ahead and save it. I go back. So now I have this note. I can create as many as I want. It doesn't matter. I can move them up and down. I can add afterwards. The tool pretty much lets you do whatever you want in that regard. Story notes is almost the exact same interface. You can go through and you can store facts, devices, settings, whatever it is you need. You can go through and you can just construct it here. The important thing to note is that these story notes are not related to a specific character. If it's related to a specific character, it should be a character note so you can keep your things together. Storylines. This is where people get slightly opinionated. Some people love the 3-act structure. Some people like the locker system or the lock system by Bell. It doesn't really matter. A storyline is a sequence of scenes with a cause and effect that has an objective and leads to a conclusion, and that is a storyline. What you call them, the order in which you put the scenes, that's all the writer's prerogative. But if you are a Act 1 kind of person, you can go through and you can do Act 1, call it the dark phone. We'll just kind of give that as a name for the phone that the kid finds in the alleyway. And I'm going to go through and say, what is this? This plot type is the riddle. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know what it does. He's trying to figure out who the dead man is, whatever. So I'm going to make this part of it. I'm going to say it's a riddle because I want to go ahead and capture all those boxes. So if you read the 20 master plots, which is referenced here, or plot and structure, you can go through and you can see, you can read more about these different types of plots. Now typically there's more than 20 in here, which you're like, why is there more than 20? Well, Plot and Structure by Bell has a different set of plot metaphors, which is kind of neat. Some of them actually made more sense to me. Like one apart and one against was kind of like the anti-hero kind of theme, and I could really see where I could use that. So after reading both those books, I was like, wow, I like that, and I don't want to limit people to their choice. So go ahead and use whichever plot style you like. If you don't really know or you don't really care and you're just going to do your own thing, just click Unique. It doesn't matter. You can put a summary in here on what you're trying to accomplish in the first act. If you know that at the end of the first act is this, this doorway to get to Act 2, this point of no return that you want them to go through, you can go ahead and you can capture it here. Or if you're the plot and structure type person where you want to use the lead, objective, conflict, and knockout, which is the Bell way of doing things, you can go through and you can plug in this information here. Now, what's important to know is whatever you plug in will come out in your exports. If you don't put the content in, it checks to see that it's not populated and doesn't show it to you. So use it, don't use it, tool doesn't care. So you can use summary if you like, you can use the locker system, whatever you want to do. Everything's good. The more data you put, the more you'll be able to help yourself. So now that I have a storyline, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open it up. And I get this huge set of instructions on basically how to do a scene. You can introduce the character, define an objective, define your conflicts, the knockout, the retrospective where your character grows. It basically gives you the step-by-step on what you want to do here. So if I go through and I say, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create some scenes, and I'm going to be really sloppy on this. I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to put some basic information in here, just enough to illustrate the point. And so I'm basically going through and just creating those blocks, and it's nothing too spectacular, and it's not supposed to be. The whole point of this is I'm showing you how this is Act 1. I got the intro, the objective, the conflict. I can make as many of these as I want, which is fine. Now I can go back and I can go, I'm going to make a storyline that's a subplot. And you don't have to prefix them like this if you don't want. I like to do that because then it helps me, with some of my ordering. And so I'm going to add the love story and then just kind of put that in here. And like I said, if I was doing this for real and I wasn't doing a tutorial, I would actually fill all this out and spend hours and hours thinking about what I'm trying to do and how I'm trying to do it. So now if I open up the love story plot and I go to scenes, I'm just going to go through and be like, the first meeting, helps if you can type correctly, and I'm just going to save, back out, and I'm going to do new, and of course I would use better names, and I did it again, and I'd plug more information in, but like I said, right now this is just to show you the timeline feature, which is really kind of cool. So now that these scenes exist, I can go through and I can plug text into them, and it'll do the analysis. So what I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to open the first one. I'm going to go to the first scene, and I'm going to click on text, and now I just have a box with just the text. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut and paste a quick paragraph that I have off to the side. It's nothing fancy, it's nothing special. It was just something I put together for just for the demo. And so I type this in, and I hit save, and it says it's saved. Now if I go to analysis, it'll go ahead and it'll tell me this is the number of words required for a scene, this is the number of words that I need, this is the number of words that I actually plugged in. This tells me that this is narrative versus dialogue. You can see the little speaker by it. And then it also tells me, hey, word little, you might need a better word, and kind of is simply something that can typically be omitted. These are rules in the elements of style, and it automatically found that for me and showed it to me. So now I can go through and I can fix this and go, hey, I want to change this, or I can say, no, I like this tone, I like this style, I want to keep it, and I can keep it. It's just, this doesn't actually change anything, it just makes you aware of it. So it's kind of like a built-in editor, or editor's check. So I plug that information in, and I go to timeline, and I can add an entire storyline at a given time. I can go through and say, just add the whole thing in the order it's in, just give it to me. And now if I want, I can go through and say, after the objective is declared, or after the first conflict, I want to go ahead and I want to add the subplot, and I want to go ahead and I want to add in the first one. Or I could add the whole thing, and I could just add the entire storyline and say I'm just going to add it to the end, and it'll put it there. And so now it's at the end. I'm like, oh, I really want this above. I can click it, it'll move it up. If I want both of these to be above the first conflict, I can click on it and go through, and so you can see that I know what storyline it's from. I can change the order, I can move them around. Let's say I want to do something really crazy. I really want the first meeting to be the first thing that happens. So if I edit this and I'm like, I don't want to press up that many times, I just want you to become the new number one. So when I do that, it automatically puts it at the top and moves everyone else down. So if I want to move things around, it's not a big deal. I can just click on it and be like, okay, you're going to be the new number 4. And it'll just move them around. It's pretty simple. It does what you need to do. Now that I actually have scenes in my timeline, if I go back to stories, I can see the analysis change. And let me show you that. So if I click here and I go back and I click on progress, you'll now see that I have 5 scenes versus the 45. And I didn't put in any sequels, but I can. And it actually has the word count giving me my percentage of dialogue. So that's kind of how the system works. So if I go through and I'm like, okay, well actually let me go back to progress. This is all cool. What does my manuscript look like? I can go through and I can click on this, and let me see if it shows you or not. So this, I'll have to double check the video and see if you can actually see this window or not. But anyhow, it exports the whole thing with the summary, and it goes through and it shows you about the author and the first meeting and the intro, and it basically gives you all your text in a way that allows you to edit it and carry forward. So that is the long and the short of the tool. Let me see here. And like I said, the generator, you can click on it and you can click refresh as many times as you want, and it'll just keep giving you people. And I always like to keep them in uppercase, because then if I do global replaces to change them, it's super easy and super fast. Like I said, everything that you put into the system, you can export. Now, the exports for scenes and for manuscript are based on the timeline. So if you have scenes which aren't included in the timeline, they don't come out in that regard, because it's using the timeline. So if you want them to be exported, move them into the timeline. You have your pitch. If you plugged it in, it'll kick it out. You can also, references to the query letter and the synopsis and how to do those things are all in these little bump outs. You just click on them, take you to research, it'll show you how to do it, and you're off to the races. So this is a quick overview of the site. Hopefully it's quick enough that you enjoyed it. My name is Dan Dawson. This is Write Fiction Online, and I wish you best of luck with your book.